we'd also like to acknowledge our third author, Dimov, on this paper. In terms of the motivation of the paper, it's something I've been thinking about for a considerable period of time. Something that, based on my professional experience and then read of the entrepreneurship literature, there was something significant missing. Kicking around with Rick a lot in the office, he agreed. And what that was this intendedly rational models of entrepreneurship. Not that they aren't accurate or they're wrong, but they don't encompass all entrepreneurial action.
One of the most important things we did in taking up this particular topic is to try to give a name and a face to the concept of impulsivity. The reason this is important is that every other facet of human existence involves elements of impulsivity, but it's very difficult to capture in reality. And when we study entrepreneurship, if we look in retrospect, then it's a process that most scholars are engaging in, a process of trying to carefully construct all the Lego pieces that creates this rational, well-reasoned, fully deliberative approach to entrepreneurial action. But what in human existence doesn't also have emotions and affect and passion? And by screening all those out, by having numerous times of recounting how entrepreneurial action occurred, lo and behold, most of these become perfect stories of just a well-reasoned stepping stones across turbulent rivers, when in fact, early stage entrepreneurship is very messy. It has a high degree of emotion and passion to it. And while we're not indicating that rationality doesn't play a key role to a certain extent, what we came to develop was the notion that we had to look at it as a spectrum, and that the two extremes almost never occur, if they ever do: pure reasoning and pure rationality and complete deliberation, or pure impulsivity. And so instead, looking on the full spectrum, it's more what we call veridical, or representative of reality, by looking at it in this respect.
And to clarify and elaborate a little bit on what Rick was just saying, is another way to think about it is impulse-driven action, which would subsume impulsivity, but also can be understood based on underlying disinhibition, which is something that we elaborated pretty good length in the paper, as well as in one of my earlier pieces in JBV in 2016. So you can consider it impulsivity just as much as impulse-driven action or underlying disinhibition, and it's all very germane to what we're talking about here.
That when you get into some basic motivators at the real root cause of any action, that you're oftentimes talking about biological factors as well. And that's why, among other things, Dan and I have begun some research on entrepreneurship as it's expressed by non-humans even. And it's outlandish as that seems at first blush. It's actually very consistent with the notion that it's not just social and human and institutional cultural overlay, but there are biological drivers for it. And we see that in 6 different species, there are different forms of entrepreneurship that's expressed. This should give everybody in entrepreneurial studies and practitioners, but certainly academics, pause to say, well, what assumptions are we making about a deliberative, hyper-rational, well-reasoned perspective? Is it possible that down in the strands of DNA, there's some idiosyncratic features that we're expressing something broader than just the human overlay for this? And so our interests are taking us down a number of different pathways.
In terms of some of the research implications, it opens up a good new venue to consider a broader set of behaviors and underlying drivers of entrepreneurial action, consistent with what Johan has been developing and others, to say we can't neglect the ephemeral, the unpredicted, the unreasoned, the irrational that just occurred, right? If we ask a person about it afterwards, it's going to elicit a reasoned, rationalized response. But so we may want to be using more experiments. We may be using simulation experiments, historical methodologies that collect historical artifacts independent of the human actors that left them.
For a practitioner, what you're doing is you're triangulating from the fact that diversity at certain stages is always going to be more helpful in being innovative and effective, especially in novel organizations trying to break new ground, as entrepreneurs would want to do. But part of the diversity that comes with that is diversity of perspective and personality. And that kind of diversity isn't something we typically embrace, and we tend to marginalize folks, and we see impulse-driven action or impulsivity as an aversive state or an aversive response. Going to Aristotle, 2+ millennia ago, he would say that's nonsense, that of course we have appetitive impulses, we have emotions, we have affect, we have passions, and that this is going to elicit a fair amount of action. And so to be effective, we need to harness the benefits of that, and so we triangulate in that fashion between those folks who can bring good, strong, execution-driven, goal-driven ideas versus those who are going to act first. There's tremendous research that actually shows there are many occasions in which action does precede intention. And with MRIs, we've seen more and more in looking at brain activity that there are many, many instances in which when you see an action and then you trace that to the chemical coloration of the brain activity for it, it does not occur in the judgment centers. It occurs in all different parts of the brain for a variety of reasons. What practitioners can take away from this then is that there are a wide range of assets that you want to triangulate on. Similarly to the point that Dan made for academicians and for scholars in this, we have a situation in which you're going to have to be very clever to get at this nascent stage activity. And that's going to require methodological triangulation. You need to do the experiments that Dan has helped to forge, and there's a great roadmap in the article talking about what sort of methodological innovations will be required so that we're triangulating as scholars in a very similar fashion as how practitioners need to triangulate within their new ventures.